Have you ever been alone in your house and suddenly felt like you weren't? Not because you heard footsteps, not because you saw a shadow, not because you watched a horror movie too late, but because something didn't feel right. Maybe it was the way the air felt colder in one room, or how your dog refused to walk down a hallway, or maybe you noticed something small, something that made you pause and whisper, "Wait, wasn't that door closed?" Because the truth is, your home can hide things, not just old memories, not just dust and cobwebs, but secrets. And sometimes those secrets aren't paranormal. Sometimes they're human. Tonight, you're about to hear 5 true stories from 5 different people who found something terrifying inside their homes. And after the last one, you might never feel safe in your own bedroom again. Because the scariest thing isn't what's outside your house. It's what has already been inside it. Welcome to Midnight Echoes. If you're new here, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications because we upload terrifying true stories that will follow you into your sleep. Now, turn off your lights, put on your headphones, and let the shadows get closer. Because these are 5 people who found something terrifying inside their homes. And the first story starts in a place most people never check. Story 1. The attic that wasn't empty. A man named Darren and his wife Elena had been searching for a house for almost a year. Not because they were picky, but because prices kept rising, and every home they liked was either too expensive or had something wrong with it. So when they found a 2-story house on the edge of town for a surprisingly low price, they thought they had finally gotten lucky. It wasn't perfect. The paint was old, the floors creaked, and the place had that smell that old houses always have. But it had space, a quiet neighborhood, and most importantly, it was theirs. The realtor smiled the whole time during the tour, speaking like she was trying to convince herself more than them. She pointed out the large kitchen, the big living room, and the wide staircase. And then she stopped at a small door at the end of the hallway upstairs, a door no taller than Darren's chest. "That's the attic," she said casually, "but it's sealed. Nothing up there, just insulation." Darren reached for the handle, but the realtor quickly added, "It hasn't been opened in years." Elena laughed. "So what, there's a ghost up there?" The realtor forced a smile, and Darren didn't notice it at the time, but her eyes didn't laugh with her mouth. Still, they signed the papers, moved in the next week, and for the first few days, everything felt normal, quiet, safe, until the first night. It happened around 2 a.m. Darren woke up because Elena was shaking him. Her eyes were wide, and her voice was barely a whisper. "Darren, do you hear that?" He held his breath. At first, there was only silence. Then, creak, a slow sound, like wood bending under weight. It came from above them, from the ceiling. Darren sat up. Elena clutched the blanket like a child. The sound came again. Creak, creak, like someone walking very slowly. Darren frowned. "It's probably the house settling," he muttered. But even as he said it, he knew that wasn't true, because the footsteps had rhythm. They moved, they stopped, then started again. Elena's voice trembled. "It sounds like someone's up there." Darren forced a laugh. "Nobody's up there. The attic's sealed." Still, he got up. He walked into the hallway and stood beneath the attic door. He stared at it. It was old and dusty, like it hadn't been touched in a long time. And for a moment, the house was completely silent. Darren felt his heartbeat slowing. Then, suddenly, thump! A heavy sound, like something dropping.
Darren froze. Elena whispered from the bedroom, "Darren, please come back." He wanted to, but something inside him, that part of him that hated fear, needed to prove it was nothing. He reached for the attic door, pulled it open. The smell hit him first. Not dust, not insulation, something worse. A stale, sour smell, like sweat and dirty clothes. The attic ladder creaked as it dropped down. Darren swallowed and climbed. Each step felt louder than the last, and when his head finally rose above the attic floor, his flashlight beam revealed something that made his stomach twist. There were footprints in the dust, fresh ones, not animal prints, not random marks, human footprints, and they weren't old, they were sharp, like someone had walked through there recently. Darren's mouth went dry. The attic was low, barely tall enough to crouch. Insulation hung down like dirty cotton. The air felt thick, like it hadn't been disturbed in a long time. But that didn't make sense, because someone had been there. Darren scanned the attic slowly, and then he saw it. In the far corner, a pile of blankets. Not old blankets, not forgotten junk, but blankets folded neatly like a bed. Beside them were empty water bottles, food wrappers, and a small plastic bag full of canned food. Darren's hands began to shake. His flashlight moved again and landed on something else. A shoe. A single, dirty shoe. Then a backpack, and next to the backpack was something that made Darren step back instinctively. A small opening, a hole cut into the wooden beams, leading deeper into the dark insulation. It was like a tunnel, a hiding place. Darren stared at it, and for a long moment, nothing moved, nothing breathed, nothing made a sound. Then his flashlight beam caught something inside. A pale face, eyes reflecting light. A human face staring directly at him. Darren's heart slammed against his ribs. He stumbled backwards, and the person inside the hole didn't scream, didn't run. They just smiled. A slow, tired smile, like they had been caught but didn't care. And then the voice came, soft, almost friendly. "Don't turn the light off." Darren fell off the ladder. He hit the hallway floor hard, knocking the wind out of him. Elena screamed. Darren scrambled backwards like an animal. He yelled for Elena to call the police, and by the time the police arrived, the attic was empty. The blankets were still there, the wrappers were still there, but the tunnel was gone, or at least the person inside it was. The officers searched every corner, but found no one. They told Darren it was probably a homeless squatter who escaped through a vent or an opening, and maybe that explanation should have comforted them, but it didn't, because Darren realized something horrifying. That person had been living above their bedroom, watching them sleep, listening to their conversations for who knows how long. And even after the police left, even after Darren sealed the attic door shut with nails, even after he placed heavy furniture in front of it, Elena still swore she could smell sweat at night. And sometimes, when the house was quiet, she would wake up suddenly and swear she could hear breathing coming from the ceiling. And if you think that's terrifying, the next story is worse, because this one wasn't found in an attic. It was found inside the walls.
Story 2. The Wall That Was Too Thick. A man named Kyle lived alone. He wasn't rich. He wasn't struggling either. He was just someone who wanted peace. And when he found a newly renovated apartment in an old building, he felt like he had finally made it. The apartment looked clean. Fresh paint, new flooring, new cabinets. It felt modern. But the building itself was old. The kind of old where the hallways always smelled like damp carpet and the lights buzzed faintly above your head. Kyle didn't mind. He moved in with only a mattress, a few boxes, and his laptop. The first week was normal. Then he started noticing something. It was small at first, a strange detail. The wall behind his couch felt thicker than the others. It wasn't obvious just by looking, but when he leaned against it, it felt unusually solid, like there was more material behind it. Kyle tapped it with his knuckles. Funk, funk. It sounded dull, different. He didn't think much of it until the sound started. It was late at night. Kyle was in bed scrolling through his phone when he heard something, a faint tapping. Not on the window, not from the hallway, from inside the wall. Tap, tap, tap. Kyle sat up. He held his breath. The tapping stopped. He laughed nervously and told himself it was just pipes. Old buildings make noises, that's normal. But then the tapping came again. This time slower. Tap, 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 tap. Kyle got out of bed and pressed his ear against the wall. And that's when he heard it. A muffled voice. So quiet he almost thought he imagined it. But it was real. Someone was whispering. Kyle stepped back. His skin crawled. He tried to convince himself it was the neighbors, but something didn't add up. The wall was inside his living room. It didn't connect to the neighbor's unit. On the other side was supposed to be storage space. That's what the building plan said. Still, Kyle ignored it until the next day. He was setting up his TV when he noticed something near the baseboard. A small scratch, then another and another. Tiny marks, like something sharp had been dragged along the wall. Kyle bent down. He touched them. Fresh. His fingers came away dusty. Then he noticed something else. A faint smell. It wasn't strong, but it was there. A stale odor, like a basement that hadn't been opened in years. Kyle's stomach tightened. That night, the tapping returned. But this time, it wasn't tapping. It was knocking. Knock. Knock. Kyle jumped. His heart raced. He grabbed his phone and turned on the flashlight. The knocking came again. Knock. Knock. Kyle stepped closer. "Hello?" he called out. Silence. Then, a whisper. "Open." Kyle's blood ran cold. He backed away, almost tripping over his own feet. He didn't sleep that night. The next morning, he decided to call the landlord. The landlord laughed it off. "Oh, pipes," he said. Kyle tried to explain the whisper. The landlord paused, then said, "You're probably hearing things. It's an old building." Kyle wanted to believe him, but he couldn't. So he decided to do something stupid, something he would regret forever. He decided to drill into the wall. Not a big hole, just a small one, just enough to see if there was a hollow space. Kyle grabbed his drill, measured the spot carefully, and pressed the drill bit into the drywall. The drill pierced through easily at first. Then, suddenly, it hit something soft. Kyle frowned. Drywall should be followed by wood studs, not softness. He pulled the drill back, and instantly the smell hit him. A rotten smell, like damp clothes and spoiled food. Kyle gagged. His eyes watered. He stepped back, covering his nose. But curiosity is a dangerous thing, so he widened the hole. And when the opening became big enough, Kyle shined his phone's flashlight inside. At first, he saw nothing but darkness. Then, the light revealed something. A plastic bag. Then another. Then, clothing. Shoes. Old shoes. A woman's sandals. A child's sneaker. Kyle's breathing became shallow. He pushed the flashlight deeper, and what he saw next made his knees weaken. Inside the wall were IDs, driver's licenses, passports, school cards, dozens of them, different names, different faces, some of them young, some of them older. Kyle's hands shook so badly his phone nearly slipped. Then he noticed something else. A notebook. a small notebook wrapped in plastic. He reached in and pulled it out. He opened it, and inside were handwritten notes, dates, times, and one repeated phrase: watched, watched, watched. Kyle stumbled backward, nearly falling. He called the police immediately. When they arrived, they didn't just inspect the wall, they tore it open, and behind the drywall, they found a hidden crawl space. Not a small one, a long one, wide enough for a person to crawl through. It led behind the walls, connecting multiple apartments, a secret passage, a hiding place, a hunting ground. And when the police investigated the building records, they discovered something terrifying. The building was connected to an old maintenance tunnel system, closed decades ago, but never properly sealed. Meaning, someone had been moving through the walls for years. Kyle moved out the same day. He didn't pack properly. He didn't even take his TV. He just grabbed his laptop and left. And even now, he refuses to live in an apartment again. Because once you've seen what's hidden in the walls, you start realizing something. Sometimes the walls aren't meant to keep people out. Sometimes they're meant to keep something in. But the next story is the one that truly made me uncomfortable, because this wasn't a hidden tunnel or an attic squatter. This was worse, because in this story, the intruder didn't hide. He lived there like it was his home too.
Story 3. Someone was using her house as a shortcut. A woman named Maya lived alone in a small rental house. It wasn't fancy, just a simple one-story home. 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen, a living room, and for the first few months, everything was peaceful. Maya liked being alone. She liked the silence, the freedom. But then, little things started happening. The first time, she thought it was her mistake. She walked into her kitchen one morning and found one of the cabinets open. Not wide open, just slightly, like someone had opened it and forgotten to close it. Maya frowned. She closed it and moved on with her day. The second time, it happened again. Different cabinet, same situation. Maya laughed and told herself she must have done it. Maybe she was sleepwalking. Maybe she was tired. Then her food started disappearing. Not all at once, not obvious enough to panic, just small amounts. A few slices of bread, a missing ramen pack, a soda can gone. Maya blamed herself again. Maybe she ate it and forgot. But then something happened that she couldn't explain. She bought a new jar of peanut butter. She knew it was unopened. She peeled the plastic seal off herself and she placed it in the cabinet. The next morning, the jar was open. The seal was gone. Maya stared at it. Her heart began to beat faster because she knew she hadn't opened it. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Every sound made her tense. The wind, the house settling, a car passing outside. Then, around 2:30 a.m., she heard something, a soft sound, like a door creaking. Maya sat up. Her bedroom door was closed. She stared at it. The sound came again, a faint click, like someone touching the doorknob. Maya froze. Her breath caught in her throat. Then, silence. For a long time, nothing happened. Maya slowly reached for her phone. She considered calling the police, but what would she say? "Hi, I think my peanut butter is haunted?" So instead, she did something smart. She bought tape. The next day, she placed small pieces of tape across her kitchen cabinets, just enough to tell if they were opened. She placed tape across her pantry door. Then she went to bed. The next morning, she rushed to the kitchen. Her heart pounded. She stared at the tape. Every single one of them was broken. All of them. Maya felt her stomach drop. Someone had been in her kitchen, and they didn't even try to hide it.
She checked her locks. Everything was still locked. Windows locked, doors locked, no signs of forced entry, which meant only one thing. Whoever was entering her home was already inside. That night, Maya didn't sleep at all. She sat on her couch holding a kitchen knife, her eyes fixed on the hallway, her ears listening for anything. At 3 a.m., she heard it again. A faint sound. Not footsteps, not creaking, something else. A scratching sound, like fingernails on wood. It came from the pantry. Maya stood up slowly. Her hands trembled. She held the knife tight. The scratching stopped. Maya stepped closer. She whispered, "Who's there?" No response. She forced herself to open the pantry door, and what she saw made her chest tighten. The pantry wall looked wrong. One wooden panel didn't match the rest. It looked newer, cleaner, like it had been replaced. Maya reached out and touched it. It moved slightly. Her mouth went dry. She pushed harder. The panel shifted inward, and suddenly it opened, revealing a dark gap behind the wall. Maya stumbled backward, horrified. A hidden door, a hidden entrance. Her hand shook so badly she almost dropped the knife. And then, from inside the darkness, she saw movement, a shape crawling forward. A man, his hair messy, his clothes dirty, his eyes wide like an animal caught in headlights. He crawled halfway out and stared at her. Maya screamed. The man raised his hands quickly. "Shh, don't scream," he whispered. Maya backed away, shaking her head. "Get out!" she shouted. The man didn't run. He didn't attack. He just stared at her. Then he smiled, a calm smile, and said something that still haunts Maya to this day. He said, "I know you're awake every night." Maya ran out of the house barefoot. She didn't even grab her keys. She just ran into the street screaming for help. Neighbors came out. Someone called the police. When the police arrived, they searched the hidden passage, and what they found was worse than anyone expected. The passage didn't just lead behind the pantry. It led under the house, a tunnel, an old maintenance route. It connected to an abandoned storm drain behind the property, meaning this man had been using her house like a shortcut, a safe resting place, a pantry to steal food from. And the most terrifying part, the police found blankets inside the tunnel, empty soda cans, and a pile of photographs. Photographs of Maya, taken through her windows, taken through the cracks of her blinds, taken from outside her bedroom door. The man was arrested that night, but Maya never returned to that house. She didn't even go back to collect her things, because she said it didn't feel like her home anymore. It felt like she had been living inside someone else's trap. And even now, years later, Maya still wakes up at the same time every night, 3:17 a.m., and she swears she still hears that whisper in her head, "I know you're awake." But if you think hidden tunnels are terrifying, wait until you hear what one family found under their basement floor. Because this next story wasn't about someone living inside the home. It was about what the home had been used for long before they arrived.
Story 4. The basement floor wasn't really a floor. A family of 4 moved into a quiet suburban home. A father named Brian, a mother named Rachel, and their 2 kids. The house was everything they wanted. A backyard, a garage, a basement big enough to store their old furniture. The previous owner had lived there for decades, and the realtor described it as a perfect family home. And for the first few weeks, it truly felt that way. The kids ran around laughing. Rachel decorated the living room. Brian finally felt like he had made it. But then, the dogs started acting strange. They had a golden retriever named Max.
Max was friendly, playful, and never scared of anything. But the first time Brian took Max into the basement, Max froze at the bottom of the stairs. His ears flattened, his tail dropped, and he refused to step forward. Brian tugged gently on the leash. "Come on, boy." Max whined, then growled. Brian laughed nervously. "What's wrong with you?" Max didn't move. Brian thought maybe Max smelled rats, so he left him upstairs. But as weeks passed, Max began standing at the basement door every night, just staring at it, not barking, not scratching, just staring, like he was listening. Then the smell started. Rachel noticed it first. After it rained, the basement smelled different. Not mold, not damp, something metallic, something sour. Rachel described it as a wet penny smell mixed with rotten meat. Brian dismissed it. Old basements smell weird. That's normal. But then Brian noticed something else. A section of the basement floor looked newer. Not much, just one patch of concrete near the back corner. The concrete there was smoother, cleaner, and the color didn't match the rest. Brian crouched down and tapped it with a hammer. Thunk. It sounded hollow. He tapped the other parts of the basement. Thud. Solid. Normal. He tapped the patch again. Thunk. Hollow. Brian's stomach tightened. Rachel watched him with worried eyes. "You think there's something under it?" she asked. Brian shrugged. "Probably just bad work from the last owner." But deep down, he didn't believe that, because concrete floors aren't supposed to sound hollow. The next day, Brian decided to investigate. He bought a chisel and a heavier hammer. Rachel begged him not to, but Brian said, "If we don't check, we'll never sleep properly." So that night, after the kids went to bed, Brian went down into the basement. He wore gloves, held a flashlight, and began striking the patch of concrete. At first, it chipped slowly. Dust rose into the air. Then, suddenly, the concrete broke, and Brian saw something underneath. Wood. Not dirt, not rocks, wooden planks. Rachel covered her mouth. Brian pulled away more concrete until a full wooden hatch was revealed. A hatch built into the floor, with rusted hinges and a metal ring handle. Brian stared at it for a long time. Rachel whispered, "Brian, don't open it." But Brian did. He grabbed the ring handle, pulled. The hatch creaked loudly, and a gust of air rose from below. A smell so awful it nearly made Brian vomit. The air smelled like decay, like something had been sealed for years and had finally been allowed to breathe again. Brian shined his flashlight into the hole, and what he saw was not a basement. It was a pit, a deep man-made room beneath the floor. The walls were rough, the ground looked like dirt mixed with old stains, and in the corner there was a chair, an old wooden chair, and tied to the chair was rope, thick rope, knotted, like someone had used it to hold something down. Brian's hands began to shake. Rachel cried softly. Then Brian noticed the wall. There were marks on the wall, tallies, dozens of them, tallies like someone had been counting days. Brian whispered, "Oh my God." Rachel grabbed his arm. "We're calling the police." The police arrived quickly, and once they saw the pit, their entire mood changed. They treated the house like a crime scene. They asked Brian and Rachel to leave immediately. They brought in investigators, dogs, flashlights, cameras, and within an hour, they found more. A piece of cloth buried in the dirt, a rusted chain, and something else, a small bone fragment. Brian's legs went weak when he heard that. The police told them it could be animal, but their faces said otherwise. And when they checked the house's history, they found a name, a previous owner from years ago, a man who had once been a suspect in a disappearance case, but had never been convicted. He had died years later, and the case went cold, until Brian opened the hatch. The family didn't stay another night. They left most of their belongings behind, because no matter how much you try to pretend, you can't raise children in a house where the basement hides a secret room built for someone to suffer. And the most chilling part? When investigators finished their work, they said something that made Brian feel sick. They said this hatch was sealed from the outside, meaning whoever was down there couldn't have escaped. But the final story tonight is the one that truly disturbed me, because this wasn't an old hidden room or a basement trap. This was something personal, something targeted, and it was found above a young man's bed.
Story 5. The Package in the Ceiling. A college student named Ethan rented a room in a shared house. It was cheap. That was the main reason he chose it. The landlord didn't ask many questions. The contract was simple, and Ethan didn't care. He just needed somewhere to sleep while he finished school. The room was small: a bed, a desk, a closet, and a ceiling with a faint brown stain. Ethan noticed it on the first day. He asked the landlord about it. The landlord barely looked up and said, "Old water damage, nothing to worry about." Ethan accepted it. For the first month, everything was fine. Then he started hearing sounds. It happened late at night. He would be half asleep when he'd hear a faint rattle above his bed, like something shifting inside the ceiling. At first, Ethan thought it was rats, or maybe the house settling. But the sound didn't feel random. It came in patterns, like something being moved carefully. Sometimes it sounded like dragging. Ethan told his roommate. The roommate laughed. "Bro, it's probably ghosts." Ethan didn't laugh, because the stain on the ceiling started changing. It grew darker, wider, almost like something was leaking. One night, Ethan woke up suddenly, his heart pounding. He didn't know why, but he felt it, that feeling of being watched. He stared into the darkness, and above him, he heard it again. A soft sound, a tiny thud, then another. Ethan sat up. His breathing was shallow. Then something fell. Not heavy, but noticeable. It hit his blanket and rolled onto his bed. Ethan screamed and jumped off the mattress. His flashlight flicked on, and he stared at the object on his bed. It was a plastic-wrapped package, wrapped tightly, like someone was trying to protect it. Ethan's hands trembled. He didn't touch it at first. He just stared, his mind racing. Who dropped it? How did it fall? Then he slowly reached forward and unwrapped it. Inside were photographs. Dozens of photographs. Ethan's blood ran cold, because they weren't random. They were pictures of him, sleeping, sitting at his desk, watching TV, scrolling on his phone. Some of the photos were taken from the corner of his room. Some were taken from above, like from the ceiling. Ethan's stomach twisted. He flipped through them. Then he found printed pages, screenshots, his social media, his posts, his comments, his school schedule, even his messages. Ethan's mouth went dry. And then he saw the notebook, a small notebook inside the package. He opened it, and on the first page was his name written in bold, Ethan. On the next pages were notes, detailed notes, every day, every time he left the house, every time he came back, even what he ate, even who visited. And then Ethan reached the last page. The last page had one sentence, written carefully, like it had been practiced. It said, "I'm ready to come back." Ethan's whole body went numb. But there was more. Taped to the last page was a key,
A small silver key. Ethan stared at the key. Then he slowly turned his head toward his bedroom door, and in that moment he noticed something he had never noticed before. His door lock was different than the others, like it had been replaced recently. Ethan's hands shook as he picked up the key, and against every instinct he walked to the door. He inserted the key, and it turned perfectly. The lock clicked. Ethan's breathing stopped. He stared at the keyhole. Then he heard a sound behind him, above him, a soft creak from the ceiling. Ethan grabbed his phone and ran out of the room screaming. He banged on his roommate's door. The roommate came out confused. Ethan yelled for him to call the police. Police arrived within minutes. They searched the room. Then they checked the ceiling. They pushed up one of the ceiling panels, and what they found made the officers step back immediately. There was a crawl space above Ethan's room. Not just a small space, a wide one, big enough for a man to sit in. And inside it were blankets, empty water bottles, food wrappers, and a flashlight. Someone had been living above Ethan's bed, watching him, studying him, collecting information. The police traced the crawl space and discovered it connected directly to the landlord's storage area, meaning the landlord had access, the landlord had keys, the landlord had control. And when the police went to question him, he was gone. His phone disconnected, his car missing, his name on the contract was fake. Ethan never saw him again. But Ethan still says the worst part wasn't the photos, it wasn't the notebook, it wasn't even the fact someone lived above him. The worst part was the sentence, "I'm ready to come back," because it meant whoever that person was had been there before, and they weren't finished.
Most people believe home is the safest place in the world. A place where the outside world can't touch you, where danger stays outside, behind locked doors, behind closed windows, behind walls. But the truth is, walls don't always protect you. Sometimes they hide things. Sometimes they hide people. And sometimes they hide secrets that were never meant to be discovered. Because the scariest horror stories aren't about demons, they aren't about ghosts, they aren't about cursed objects. The scariest horror stories are the ones that could happen to anyone. The ones where you wake up one night and realize you were never alone. So tonight, before you go to sleep, listen closely. If your house creaks, don't ignore it. If your attic feels too quiet, don't assume it's empty. And if your basement smells strange after rain, maybe, just maybe, you should stop asking questions. Because once you discover what's been hiding inside your home, you can never unsee it, and you can never feel safe again. If you enjoyed these terrifying true stories, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. And comment below which story disturbed you the most: the attic, the walls, the basement, or the package in the ceiling. And remember, lock your doors, but more importantly, never forget to check what's already inside. Until next time, this is Midnight Echoe.